Welcome to Live Sense8. I'm Sheila Applegate.
And I'm Zac Hansen.
And a special shout out to Justin Applegate for the composition of the Live Sense8 podcast music. In this podcast, we dive deep into the concepts of consciousness and other interesting trivia in the Netflix Original Series Sense8. We're doing an episode-by-episode exploration of how we can live a Sense8 life. And we're also talking with cast and crew and team members of Sense8 to hear the experience from their perspective.
Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Tracy Wright, conscious parenting and living coach. She's shining clarity with compassion and understanding. You can find out more about her on consciouslyawesome.com. We also have Yrsa Dranchak, conscious life coach. Discover how vibrant life can be. You can find out more about Yrsa at myconsciouslifecoach.com. And Divine Phoenix Books. Books with a purpose for a positive change. Check out Divine Phoenix Books at divinephoenixbooks.com.
In this segment, we talk about what's going on in the world of Sense8. Let's have a great celebration for everyone who pulled together to make the Sense8 mural in San Francisco a reality. We have exceeded the fundraising goals by about $600. So that project will be moving forward. Thank you to Deirdre and Maximilian and everyone who came to help in the fundraising effort and everyone who donated. The extra money will be put into future murals. We do not have those details yet, but as they become available, we will share them with you. The idea is to make murals around the world for the Sense8 fandom and to help spread the Sense8 message. Remember that the I Am WeCon in Berlin is still in its fundraising effort, so be sure to head on over to GoFundMe and support the I Am Also a WeCon in Berlin, Germany. You can buy your tickets ahead through the fundraising effort. This will only be available to us if we meet the fundraising goal. So with a few weeks left, let's all pull together and support that project. We also have a new program coming up in September that I want to tell you about. As you know, my inspiration for creating the Live Sense8 podcast and strong-arming Zac to do it along with me is because when I watched Sense8, I saw such a perfect reflection of the teachings that I have offered to the world throughout the last 20 years. Those teachings, and I've mentioned it before, were combined 4 years ago into a very comprehensive program called the Consciously Awesome Program. And it allows you to integrate these concepts that we see and love in Sense8 into your real daily life. They have such a direct correlation that I just know all of you will love this program. If you're interested, it is going to start in September. In taking this program, you can feel the cluster energy, manage your stress better, improve your relationships, connect to the world around you more intimately through your intuition, and have that sense of team that the cluster really had, that sense of having soul energy there to navigate and to support. I know we watch this as a sci-fi and a fiction, but I think the reason that the fandom is so strong is that we know in our soul that it's closer to reality than we may live on our daily basis, but our soul knows that that's the way we could really live. Maybe not the tiny nuances, but the themes of it, the energy of it, the expression of it. This is a perfect art to help our souls remember how life is truly meant to be, with beautiful, healthy, intimate relationships, navigating life, feeling a support system, enjoying all of the senses that we have here in the world. The core of this program is meditation. So I know a lot of you have talked about meditation. I've been asked a couple times to lead a meditation. This program uses the technique of meditation to help you reach these states of living in this consciousness, living that Sense8 life. So if you're interested in learning more about it, just give me a shout out on Twitter or Facebook. You can also email team@livesense8.com. Let me know you're interested, and we'll just go from there with some more details. All right? And if you have any questions, you can reach me at any of those sites as well. All right, let's get on with today's episode.
All right, let's dig into this episode of Season 1, Episode 12, titled I Can't Leave Her, directed by Lily and Lana Wachowski, and written by Lily and Lana Wachowski and J. Michael Straczynski.
I Can't Leave Her. We really only have two plots going on right now, aside from the supporting of each other. Two main plots. One is Riley, and we know the title relates to Riley not being able to leave her memory of her baby. And then we have Wolfgang, and that's the only other one that has a plot, really deep into in this episode. And he tries to say goodbye to Kala. So I think I Can't Leave Her kind of fits for both of the plots that are going on.
When I first ran into this episode and I saw the title, my first thought was, Will can't leave Riley.
There you go. So I think, like always, there's one line, and it is Riley's line. But Kala does say, so at one point, Wolfgang says, I think I've come to say goodbye. And then she said, I'm not ready to say goodbye. Same theme, not the same words. But so we've got some not wanting to leave going on and grieving going on as a theme. The other big thing that happens in this one is everybody starts to work together to get Riley out of the BPO. So some big stuff happening here. We saw some themes with this that we're going to talk about as we go along. Actually, this has not happened to us before, but we want to use a clip from the very, very beginning. This is what opens the episode. So I think we'll just dive into the clips and talk as we go along, as we move through this episode.
So in the beginning of this episode, we have Will is a young fellow, little young man, and he's in with a counselor of sorts, getting some help.
You like the snow? For some people, snow brings on a very specific feeling. Some love it. It feels clean and pure, like a fresh start or a beginning. For others, it's frightening. Cold and silent and isolating. What are you thinking about when you look at the snow?
That I'm gonna have to shovel it.
All right. So, Sheila, you had some cool thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. So let's go back to my early days as a child therapist, because whenever they depict therapists on television, I'm always a little frustrated because I think people are trying to do better with them, but there's always a little rap, or maybe I just have my idea of how everyone should be a therapist and it doesn't fit with the rest of the world. But anyway, I do want to laugh at Will's response that I'm thinking about shoveling it, because that coming from the therapist point of view, that is such a realistic statement when you're trying to take a child deep and they're not going to do it, and they're just like going to push it back in your face and not give you anything. Like, yeah, you want to go deep, I'm just thinking about shoveling it. So on the surface, very, very much taking me back into my earlier days as a child and family therapist. But in this, because this is art and this is a masterpiece, and we get to see through time into the future and into the past and all over the place through this art, it has a different meaning to me. So when we think about the full episode, and as you're going to come along on this journey, you're going to remember that this is the episode that they get Riley out of the BPO, and it's hard for her to leave. We get all the flashbacks of her baby and how she gave birth and the baby died and the pain that she has around that, all in the snow. So we've got the layers of foreshadowing, but if we think about this as real people, Will in his childhood is already in that sense of timelessness, already picking up on Riley's relationship to snow. Just through this dialogue, we have that set up, and her trauma with it, her fear with it, and then the cleansing, and sometimes people find snow cleansing. I thought that was interesting. I mean, well, I get it, because sometimes winter can look really muddy until that soft snow comes over. But a new beginning is also what Will gets when he comes to that precipice in the snow with Riley later on in his life. So I think it's really setting up the episode in that way. And then, and this is because of you, Zac, and your understanding about Will and his relationship to Riley later on, that I was able to springboard from that and say the shoveling it, like he does in a sense have to go and help Riley clean up the mess of her snowy memory in the future.
Right. And this scene too is really important because we're seeing like just in this one small scene, it's about 3 minutes and we only got about 30 seconds of a clip, but it's very telling about Will's character. Like he's thinking he needs to be responsible for cleaning up the snow, right?
Right.
So he has a sense of responsibility that's just kind of been built into him since childhood. So yeah, he is going to have to go clean up that mess in the snow, so to speak. And the clip goes on and it prefaces the savior behavior.
Right, because the therapist tells him, that sometimes you're trying to help, and he references his father being an alcoholic, which we didn't really know. We know that he is in the later years, but to me, the story that everybody was talking about was that alcoholism came later. Well, I think right around the Sarah thing, so...
Yeah, that might have been referenced.
That he couldn't.
Maybe.
That he couldn't. But Will wouldn't already have alcoholic behavior. So my guess from that one, therapist view, is that that's an indication that the alcoholism was an issue for Will's childhood because he was already formed. If it was already diagnosed as alcohol at that point versus, dad's drinking a lot because he can't cope with this current issue.
Right, so that's his dad aspect, right? But then the nobody else around Will can understand that there's this little girl,
right,
that he can talk to, giving him messages, and he's been trying to save her.
Right, he's trying to save the little girl and trying to make the family feel better. That's why he went to visit them. So he is trying to make everyone better. And of course, now moving into my second career of being a spiritual communicator, really pissed off at that therapist for basically teaching Will that he made up the spirit. And that's not at just the therapist or the character of the therapist. It's our society that, we do that. Why are we so committed as a society to indoctrinate children with the belief that nothing beyond the physical exists. It just makes no sense.
Well, I mean, it does make sense to me because I would say a bulk of people don't have these experiences to relate to. So the only time we can talk about them is if they're clinical diagnoses of these experiences because somebody's mentally ill, and that's just not the case. That's my personal perspective.
Yeah,
Society can't relate to these experiences.
But society can't relate because at some point, and I don't know how far back we go, and I can't philosophize this completely, but the Dark Ages maybe, some point, because everybody comes in being able to see. Like, that's the thing. Babies see. We don't. You don't lose your veil. We let it be imagination. We let them have their imagination, and we don't try to restrain it until they get to be about 4 or 5 years old. And then all of a sudden, I mean, like they can have the magic of Santa Claus and Christmas, and angels are with you. And then all of a sudden, Jesus is your friend. He loves you. And I'm sure it's in other religions too. And then all of a sudden, okay, grow up and get real. Jesus can't really talk to you. Angels can't really be next to you.
Santa is not real. The Easter Bunny is not real. Oh, I'm sorry for listening, and I just ruined that for you.
Well,
I'm so
it's
sorry.
not true because it's all real. So it's just the society that, I mean.
And then we have people that come into the world and do miraculous things. Like, I don't know, Joan of Arc. And she did amazing things. And she was listening to voices.
Yeah.
Right?
All the
and
amazing people listen to voices.
But later in history do we revere her. But then she was one crazy person. And that's what we do. That's what humans do.
Right.
Because they can't relate.
They're scared of it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. So anyway, soapbox again. If we want to change the world in one generation, we could do that by taking away that story and letting the children have their full capacity.
But Sheila, if we did that, how would we know if they're sick or not?
Well, we don't as a society want to heal this world in one generation because that scares the F out of us. But I'm just saying, I came down to earth. I'm telling you one thing. You want to heal this place? This is what you do. Okay, out of here. Goodbye.
So back to Will.
I put 2 kids into the world like that, so, maybe they'll multiply.
Maybe they will. We'll know in a couple of years, I imagine. Will and the savior mentality, because, his whole archetype and character as a police officer and protector, it's kind of layered in this scenario because we do have the stereotypical family setting that the therapist knows about and disregarding the visions, and then we have the visions that really are true, and he has to deal with that, right? Because nobody can relate to him either, so he's got to feel really alone. But anyway,
and she actually says to him to shush at that point, so I don't think he shut her out. But that's cool too because it's in the snow, and that's to me, snow is silencing.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, I like snow.
For me, in that particular moment, it was like when Will knew that maybe it's okay not to trust people that think they want to help him. Like maybe people who are quote experts really aren't experts, right? Because he listened to her over him. So now we see where Will also, as a police officer, he blurs the lines a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so we go from this cop who's saving this kid from the ghetto, and then he's doing a deal with the kid from a ghetto, and then he's breaking the code and using his dad's passwords and doing all these things he shouldn't be doing. And then he's on heroin for quite a long time.
He's on the...
Oh, whoops. But we said way back in the Wayback Machine that we will have spoilers. So
I know, but we've been trying not to.
We're really trying to stay on point here.
Okay, so if you are coming along one by one with us, you now have a little peek, but you don't know why or what happens or how it all plays out. Yay.
I'm sure if you zoom in on the boat at the very end of this episode, you zoom in really hard and you see those vials of medicine. I'm just guessing they're either morphine or liquid oxy.
Right. Well, we do know. So it's not like a huge huge spoiler. At this point, he learns that to block whispers, he needs.
We didn't know what substance he was using,
or how long he was going to use
right?
it. And we don't.
But my point is, he was a cop,
right?
And now he has to live. He has to literally survive by doing drugs. Like, what the fuck? Right. Like, yeah. It's very twisted.
Well, and then going back to the Sarah and the therapist who does genuinely want to help him. I'm seeing it also as Jonas, and like that's when it is what you're saying. It's just one more extension of it. That's when he does learn to trust himself and to question authority and question people who are trying to help him, which Jonas emphasizes for him. And then he ends up having that relationship with Jonas of, questioning his authority, questioning his support, and tuning into himself all along, which is cool. Like, it starts in his childhood.
So I really think this was a big scene for Will's character, for us to learn a lot about Will in 3 minutes.
And then when we add the Riley stuff onto it, and we'll go into the scene with Riley, the savior mentality that you talked about, the wanting to go save Riley, and some of the energy around that. And you notice something really cool in there, and that is that when they first touch, they're flashing between rooms, including the room that Sarah was lobotomized in.
Yep, it was a very cool scene. Very cool. So, because we're talking at the very end of the episode where Wills comes into BPO and he touches Riley for the first time in the bed. And then this is a really cool scene because Riley and Will, when he touches her, they actually switch places. Right. So it's Will is the one who's in the bed, drugged up and feeling the way, and vice versa. And then they flash between the both of them as children.
Right. And quick. I think that's kind of what I was springboarding into. Sarah, that room, Riley, the children, the child, and we don't know who Sarah is, but what role she plays, or is she a conduit for him to be connecting with Riley? We don't know. Probably there's more than that. But you can see now that the two of them have been on some level connected since childhood. That's my interpretation. And then that moment, to me, we're going into, again, my background of the twin flame and that intense relationship. So within the cluster, the two that kind of Riley and Will represent some of that twin flame union, as my language would have used, and so do Kala and Wolfgang. And those are the two groups that are the two sets that are really playing out the theme here today. But that touch, and I think I talked about it in the episode when they touched and they weren't even physically there, but that touch when time stands still and you are like, that is what the twin flame is. It's the ultimate cluster energy, and when they touch, they are each other. There is no separation. So incredibly depicted. Very cool, I don't know where the writers, I don't know their background or their experience, but somebody knows something in there, because that couldn't have been more visually depicting my experience of that.
Somebody probably had some experience with that, I'm guessing.
I would guess that.
To have that good of a direction. For me, I felt like Will and Riley in the scene is they're bound together by fate in a way. And their fate would be both of them to overcome the savior complex and the trauma that Riley went through.
Yeah, I think
together.
I would just say I think that in a way they're both the savior complex can't exist without the victim complex. And at the end of this episode, when Riley is holding Will, and then she gets to move a little bit into the savior because she gets to save, and he gets to be, in a sense, he is still the savior because he's using it to go save people, but then she's got to caretake and take care of him. And so in a sense, I was thinking that it's part of the healing process of that savior mentality is to experience both sides of it and allow that. And I see a little bit of that coming in there too.
Yeah, it's really cool about this scene as they're touching and you're watching the scenes change behind them. So they're changing places and stuff. And then they kind of go back through childhood and back through the moments they've had. And then what's really cool about this scene, in my opinion, is Will actually lifts Riley off the table where all the lobotomies happen. So it's like he's actually fulfilled saving that person in that room. That's what I saw. And that's how he was fulfilling that. Because instead of chasing Sarah, he could save Riley. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's what I saw. And it flashes really fast. So if you're not paying attention, you might not, if you didn't rewind it, you might not go, oh, that I know what that room is. Right. It took me a minute to figure out where that room was. But so anyway, I thought it was really cool.
That is very cool. Yeah, I did not pick up on that right away. And I thought that was really cool when you noticed it. And I think we do that in life, right? Like we repeat relationships with other people. We repeat situations. And, people say that, if you don't work out your father, daughter, energy, you're going to go marry your father and
or son and mother or whatever we all have our patterns. That
right.
We go
or, I used to work with domestic violence victims and it's like you didn't, we're not saying anyone deserves to get beaten. And if we don't change your relationship to the victim and abuser relationship, then you're going to repeat this again. So that idea that we play it out with multiple people until we resolve an issue within ourselves is...
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be people. It can be money. It can be addiction. I mean, there's so many different human behaviors that we kind of have to look into as far as patterns go for us to...
I think of it as spiraling up a mountain, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, are we here again? I took care of this. What am I doing here? But if you look at the perspective, you're at a much higher level and you're moving into mastery, even though it feels like life repeats itself.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like, for me anyway, I'm like, this pattern will never change. I've had those thoughts, and eventually, years later, it changes, and I'm like, hallelujah.
So if we skip back a little bit to in the BPO, and Riley's actually having a near-death experience, and she's facing her past, and she's having a new beginning. And we've got Yrsa in there, and it even feels like Angelica and Jonas throughout this are kind of encouraging them to just kill themselves.
Well, that's what they knew what to do.
Yeah.
Because it works.
It works.
Right.
It stops it, and that's all they knew.
And that's what makes this cluster different.
Because they know, they learn, or they hang in there until they can learn something different.
Or they just choose not to give in, right?
Right.
Let's find another way. Let's keep going. Like this.
Yeah.
I refuse. So many times do we hear this throughout the seasons, and then they're just like, nah, I don't think so.
I refuse to give up.
Right.
And they refuse to give up on each other, which is really important. Yeah. So that's kind of intense with Riley going through it and suspicious. And at one point during it, Jonas says that they have someone in the BPO. So that's a big...
who is it?
Someone has a heart attack, and that's how they get her out. So we do see that there is, I love Jonas. We're seeing a little good in him. We're seeing something's going on. He's not just straight out working for Whispers. So something happens, and then they turn.
That's still to be decided by me.
But there's different things with that I want to talk about. But I think in the middle of all this, we have a little bit of a comic relief, and I think we have that clip. So
here it is.
Let's comic relief here.
Lito.
Don't worry.
Do I know you?
Yeah. We had sex. What? Oh, that was very special. Oh, hey,
We're on a clock here, fellas.
follow me.
Yeah, that was super funny.
Yeah.
Brian does a great job there.
It's an awesome line. And I think we just picked it mostly because it's funny.
Right.
We wanted to hear it again and again and laugh with you guys with it. But, because this is what we do, I will take it a little bit deeper. I like it also because I think even as viewers, sometimes we forget because there's a lot of talk about the orgies in Sense8, and there are no physical orgies. This is not sex, and it is sex, and that's kind of what Will is saying. It's something more than, it's something different. It's in a whole other category when you open up to creation energy and allow that flow to move between people. And Zac is just looking at me like he's laughing and saying I'm making a big, but no, it's really true. And
I don't know. I don't know if that's what Will's trying to say.
well, I think he was trying to say, I thought he actually said, well, it wasn't really sex, because he didn't really, like, that's a fantasy, right? Like, that's someone in your head. Like, so if you identify, say, as Will, as heterosexual, and then you're suddenly in this energetic orgy with both sex and Leto saying, yeah, we had sex, and he's like, yeah, that's not exactly, someone's in your head. Like, that's someone watching your it's like when your fantasies meet, you run in and meet, and they're not even meeting in the physical yet. They're just talking to each other for the first time. So anyway, I think it's cool.
It was good.
I do think it's really, really, really important. And I do think, even though it was funny, that the writers do want us to remember that the sex is something different than the sex that our world often thinks of. It's something more. It's special.
It is special.
So while all this is going on, and there is a little bit more to talk about with Riley and their escape, but while this is all going on, the only other real plot that's moving in action is Wolfgang going in and killing his uncle. So again, we watch how the scenes that they pick, the storylines relate to each other. And in a sense, Riley has to shovel, clean up the snow from the past. Riley has to let go of her past and find a way to get herself out of that so she can be free to love or to show up for love. Will is doing the same thing in a way by going in and, violently murdering a whole, 18 people.
You mean Wolfgang?
Yeah. What did I say?
You said Will.
Will's just all over the place. Oh, you know what? There's a scene, too, when I mixed those up when I was watching it the other day. So that's actually, here's me trying to cover up a mistake. But, okay, so I made a mistake. But I actually was blending Will and Wolfgang and their storylines a little bit when we were watching this episode last night, too. So I do think that we're being shown some of the similarities that are going on here with them, because Wolfgang has a savior mentality, too. And he's always looking out for Felix. And we think, like, whatever went down in the family, he couldn't save his mom. He's killing the uncle to save them, his life. And even Kala, like, because he said in the last episode, like, this is to save you because they'll get to everyone I love. So I don't know, there's some combinations of that going on to me. But it's interesting because he sees himself as a monster. And speaking of domestic violence, that's what he was in, domestic violence, I think. Like he said, we watched him get beat up, like abused by his father.
And ridiculed and just,
yeah.
his dad's a big bully, big thug.
Yeah, so there's stuff going on there, and he's mad at his uncle for never helping him. My interpretation of that line when he kills him. But he says, my father was a monster, and you're a monster, and I'm a monster. And then he turns to Kala after shooting him and says, this is why you have to marry Rajan. So I think that's a big line.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have Wolfgang. He's a gangster. Like, he kills people. He steals. Like, why? What about that would make you think you're not a monster?
Right.
He's good at fighting.
Well, because
like
in his heart, he also knows he does it for love. So that's the paradox of him, right? Because I think I think he knows he lives like a monster, but I think this is why everyone loves Wolfgang, is because they see the good in him. But the truth is, they're good in everybody, you know?
Right. Well, again, for me, Wolfgang, in anybody who grows up in a particular environment, such as Wolfgang's, like, they're just kind of this common lore in the non-gangster world or underground world is, you can't really get out of that stuff, right? Like, once you're in, you're always in. It's really hard, and it depends on what level of mafia or gangster elements you're in. If you're tattooed and all this kind of stuff, you can move somewhere else, but it might follow you around, that kind of thing. So, and we see this when even Wolfgang's headed into the mansion. Like, he was
born into
right.
This.
He could run, but he's gonna be running, and he's running from the same problem, or he can confront this problem and snuff it out or die. Like, that's for him, he's backed up against the wall, and the only way for him to get out of this situation and on the other situations that he's had in his life, right? Like the bullies, they're going to sit there and bully him until you stand up for yourself. Right. So, and then Felix came and backed him up, but he stood up for Felix and took on those boys and stuff. So, I mean, it's just, it's a different culture and things. So for me, that's just kind of my perspective, is he was born into this, and this is how he knows to solve problems, and it works, and he's really good at it. What I found interesting, is his uncle. Man, what a fucking dick this guy is, in my opinion. Because he says to him, how could you do this to your own uncle? And yet he's trying to revenge his son, but does not take in consideration what his son did to Wolfgang. Like, that doesn't even cross their minds. Like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, bro. I'm a bad guy. I didn't mean to do that. No, it's always, I want to take what's mine, and you're wrong. So that's why the fight continues, because nobody succeeds to say, you know what, maybe I messed up. I should take a step back. But that's not the world they live in, right? And his uncle just like throws that little bit of manipulation, and I would have shot the dude in the face too. I was like, what do you mean, me betraying my uncle? Like, you just stood around most of my life. You didn't take care of my dad, and now you want to kill me because your son came after me and shot my best friend? Like, seriously? Like, I would be angry.
Right.
Really angry.
Right. And I think that, that's that conditional family, like that.
Right.
It works when it works in my favor.
Exactly.
That's how the law goes, the family law. Yeah. But interestingly, I liked that, one of the things I really like, and it's just a tiny quick scene, when Will and Riley are escaping the BPO and the helicopter's up, and shout out to Neats, because she's the one that figured out the weather. And I'm doing that because I'm going to take responsibility when I mess up, because back when we had Michael on the first time, I was like, Bug does all the work. Neats is cool, but she doesn't really do much. But she does. I've been noticing more of the magic that she weaves. She may not be like the ultimate hacker, but she does. She has this incredible way of thinking outside the box, and being creative and putting pieces together. She is.
And she does it quickly, if you notice. So she's like, oh, look, like they're in the middle of this like quick fix that they need, and she comes up with it. So there's really no time to like celebrate that so much, except for when Nomi's like, oh, I love you so much, or whatever,
Right. So I just had to take responsibility for that one. But they're escaping, and she says that he has to keep going. like into the clouds, and Whispers is like, you can't do it because they bring the helicopter down enough so that they could kill everyone. And he's like, you can't do this. And Will's like,
Kill us all.
Yeah, he says, you can't kill us all. And Will says,
but I know somebody who can.
Yeah, he says, I can't, but I know someone who can. And then Wolfgang comes in. So one of the things I love about that is that as humans, we have a hierarchy in our mind of like good attributes and good traits that we bring to the puzzle and bad traits. And I think that being cool with killing and killing yourself and not caring if you live or if other people live, that detachment from life as sacred in a sense, is not a trait that we tend to celebrate, but it has its role, because when we work so hard not to allow death to occur, sometimes people end up doing really bad things or hurting people in some ways, even just trying to stay alive. So that balance of life and death and that non-attachment that may be seen as needing therapy in some ways has its gifts too. And I think it's about finding, when we look at the cluster, really the cluster is one person, right? And we don't like to admit that all those aspects are within us. All the different things that get portrayed, the victim and the savior, the killer and the doctor or the scientist, the healer, yeah, whatever that is, the fighter,
the lover,
and the lover, like they're all those aspects are in a part
so
of
many
us
archetypes.
some way, yeah, and they're in every person.
This is life just is, and it's the human beings who assign this isness value, right? So it's just our projection of morality onto this thing that we are born into. And it's all kind of really made up. And it just really depends on what society and what culture has what values that they place on everything. So I think it's great to see that, for you to bring that up, Sheila, because it just is what it is. And in the ultimate truth of things, there is no judgment when we're all said and done with this human experience.
Right.
And that's one of the things that the society, the cultural stories that we tell ourselves has not really, that's not the story we tell ourselves, right? We tell ourselves we're going to be punished and all this kind of shenanigans, and it holds us in guilt and many other things when, life's not so black and white. There isn't this judgment and such. So anyway, I just like that you brought that up. Like it just is, and it's not good and it's not bad. It's just an outcome to a situation, and you move to the next situation and have more outcomes until you get off the roller coaster called life. Anyway,
yeah.
What I liked about not what I liked about, again, with these bad guys being dicks. Like Whispers is trying to manipulate Will, and when he's whispering in his ear and he's telling him all about Will and how he's a good guy, and it's like, I would have been like, Whispers, I'm saving 8 people. Like 8 people's lives, or at least 6 if I crash into you. Like, I'm not going to kill us all. I'm going to save some people doing it, right? So it's just like, how can you hold that, like, if I was Will?
Right, but when we're looking at it as a story to us as the viewers and those archetypes, and when that part of us nags to attach to one part of our personality that we want to be, that we want to be perceived as, that we want to feel because we like it better, then that which we may consider moral can be our downfall, where in that very same scene, that which we would consider immoral becomes the strength.
Right, and how many people would Will have saved if he killed Whispers in that moment? How many more clusters would have saved if he killed Whispers in that moment, right?
We would not have had a season 3, maybe.
It's a good thing I wasn't driving that ambulance. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the other thing with Will is I guess he wasn't really willing to kill himself because he wasn't physically there. Wolfgang again. See, they're blurring for me. So Capheus pops in earlier and helps with the starting of the van, and I'm jumping to that because I was, I was falling for the whole sharing. It's Will, now it's Wolfgang, it's Capheus. And I just wanted to, I think I might have said it in the beginning, I just want to say, like, I'm pretty sure this is, and I think it has to be because Will hasn't met Leto yet, right? But I think this is the first time that we see the whole cluster come together for one task, and that's to get Riley
safe and sound.
Yeah, and so she becomes that conduit. Well, both of them still. Okay, and now just an offshoot, that car scene cracked me up. I loved that Neitz and Nomi they used the psychology of men to get him in. But
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that was really funny because they just get a nice car and they make it like all smoking, and then it's like, yeah, guys can't resist it. You'll get in. And that was like just a very funny, like.
It was good.
That was just a great line. That was like, think about the writer's room when they came up with that. They were all like cracking up. I can totally see the writer's room with that one. That was so fun. And then, so there's another thing that I noticed. There's a couple things I noticed when they're leaving the mountain, in the mountains. And I noticed it in the BPO. And without any spoilers, when we were doing some of the finale interviews, we talked about the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, and how typically, or the body is perceived. I get that kind of confused because I guess the right side of the body, the brain is controlling the left side. So it's kind of an infinity sign in there too. But typically when you're looking at metaphysics, the left side is considered the divine feminine. It's considered the heart center, the limbic resonance, that emotional center. And twice in their escape, they had him turn to the left. And I know that I could be just like making mountains out of molehills here, but I don't know. I think that was chosen either divinely inspired, because when they leave the BPO, they go towards the left. And then when they're turning in the mountain and end up going down the road where Riley lost her baby and her husband and gave birth, and that whole trauma, they say go to the left again. And of course it could have just been geography, but I think it's really cool because they go to the left and she has to face the emotions. And so even though they were physically escaping on a route out of the BPO, Riley and Will, if we think of the savior-victim mentality that started in his childhood with Sarah, they're escaping their past. They're escaping their emotional burden that's kept them from loving each other, from showing up fully in life, for doing whatever it is they have to do. So they turn, and that escape route is through the emotional side. It's through the emotions. And you don't start out a whole series on limbic resonance if you aren't trying to put a message to the world that our way out is through emotions. It is through opening up and experiencing and allowing ourselves to navigate and bring that side of ourselves into balance, in my opinion.
Excellent observation, Sheila.
So either I'm like right on target with the writers, or I'm like making them out to be way more than they are. Either way, I think it's all the same. I think it's just awesome.
It's art.
I think
you can
it's art,
interpret
exactly.
it however you want.
Well, you can interpret it however you want, and it's art, and art is layered, and art is something sometimes more than what we even create. Like, I know, I've said it before, I go back and read my book because I can learn from it, and I wrote the thing. So Yeah, like it
And
doesn't
art
matter.
made public is love, right?
Art.
Did I hear that along the way?
Maybe something like that. Something like that. So the other thing that happens during that, which I thought was really cool, in playing with timelines, and for me, in the conscious meditation technique, we're learning to move our attention through different frequencies and different realms of consciousness. So when they turn the corner, and they're driving along and they are having flashbacks of childhood, and they're reliving, especially Riley's reliving her childhood. Angelica's there. We don't know why she
That
made
was weird.
Maybe to help create that. I don't
haven't
know
figured
what
that
that
out.
one is about. But we got all these flashbacks that they're having, and Will is now pregnant. Like, he's sharing her body. He looks down. He's like, "What the fuck?" He's like 9.5 months pregnant. And while that's going on, while they're literally or figuratively experiencing a different timeline or a different part of this timeline, or maybe both, Nomi says, "I can't reach either one of them. They were there heading towards the mountains. Now they're gone." And so I think that it didn't have to do, it was an unnecessary line for the plot, really. It's a note to us of realms of consciousness, that's how I take it.
I think it's great. I think this show can go in a lot of directions with timelines.
Oh, yeah.
And many other cool things. So I could see this being purposeful.
Yeah.
Right, with timing.
Yeah. And I think that I really do believe that Lana and the writers have a consciousness that they're trying to bring forward, an understanding. Even if we go back to Ethan talking about when Lana's talking to some of the other people, he's like, I can't even understand what they're talking about. But all that's incorporated, and the conscious brainwashing that we're allowing, reprogramming, re-downloading of information, those little things that we don't even have to notice, our brain will pick up on those, and it will start to create the story. It will start to figure it out, because that's how our brain works. So even if we didn't point that out, it does its magic, which is so cool.
Yep. Because when you have those little, the line just didn't, why? There's certain things, like, for example, Angelica popping up. You really have to sit back and think, why did they put that in there? I got to figure this out.
Right. I don't know that
so
yet.
So it leaves this pause, and that's one of those really curious lines of how do you lose the connection from your Sense8 buddies? Right, because
so
they drove into some fog, or because that's not the case. So you gotta. It makes you pause and think about. We might not have the answers. Maybe they don't have the answers. The writers probably did. Right. But I'm just saying, it makes you stop and think about those moments. Like, hey, it brings that pause.
Right.
You got to think.
Yeah. Cool. So we have one more clip to look at.
All right. And this is As the Escape, Not Escape. The breakthrough. Here we go.
I can't leave her.
Riley, please.
I'm so sorry, but I can't do it.
I know how much it hurts. I know you want to lay down here and never get up again. I know it because I feel it. I can feel it. That means somehow, somewhere, you can feel what I'm feeling too. I love you. That's why I can't give up. I love you.
Love conquers all.
Love conquers all. And I think, That's just, it's more than that. It's also empathy. It's that limbic resonance again. It's that when you can't do it yourself, allow someone else's feelings and love, right? So we can support each other. And if she didn't have it within her, she does have it within her because Will does. That's a twin flame thing. That's a cluster thing, but it's a humanity thing because beyond clusters, beyond the connectedness of deep soul connection, there's oneness, and we are all one. All of humanity is a cluster. So somewhere in the world, there is someone that has the exact strength, the emotional well-being, the ability to move forward that you may feel like you're lacking. Whether you reach out to that person in the physical or in the emotional, when you allow that in, you find the strength because as a humanity and in a space of oneness, we can share strength.
We can. I mean, just to bring it down to a practical, everyday level, Mr. James Motlow, he was such an adventurer when we were together, right? And so his sense of wonder was contagious. And, we've all heard the interview with Paula Gola, and we know his positivity is contagious. So whatever strength you're feeling at the time, right? You project out, and it is contagious, whether it's positive or negative.
Well, that's right? What I was thinking. I think I just want to jump on that real quick because sometimes we say these cool concepts, and if we don't take them just a little bit further, we end up causing more pain with it. So yes, positive or negative, remember Wolfgang being able to drive that car into the helicopter was positive, even though he may see that as an attribute of himself that he doesn't like. So try not to beat yourself up about only feeling the good stuff, or that if you have something that you may not think is healthy, that you may harm somebody because of it. So to me, it's about going in and finding what's in you and knowing what's in you and doing your best, like Riley and Wolfgang did in very different ways. And even Will being able to find it in him to drug himself and take that path and risk it all, whatever that is inside of yourself. Try not to say, I have to suppress it because it may hurt somebody else, but rather go in, find it, feel it, use it, and allow that to then, in its healthy way, be used by other people. That's what I would want to say.
You did say that.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, everyone. I think that is it for this episode. We are basking in the wonder of its brilliance once again and enjoying our time with you.
All right. Thank you very much. If you want to contact us with any questions or comments, at live_sense8 is our Twitter handle. You can email us at team@livesense8.com. We have a big shout out to Miss Sarah Applegate, the editor of the podcast. Thank you very, 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 very much for engaging with us on social media and all the sharing and shout outs and representation that you give us. Thank you very much for spending your time here with us today on the podcast. And until next time, stay connected.